Sit back, relax, and let's have a chapter chat. I'm your host, Jessica Foster, and we have best-selling author Kristina McMorris here with us today. Hi, Kristina.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
We're so glad that you're here, and you're joining us all the way from Portland.
I am, yes. We're like enjoying the very last of the summer out here.
You have been busy because you have a brand new book out, The Girls of Good Fortune, and this is another historical fiction novel for you.
It is. It's actually my 8th, so I'm pretty excited to have it out in the world and to very soon start jumping into number 9.
And I was captivated by this story from the moment that I read the first page. And it's about the Shanghai Tunnels. And I have to admit, this is something that I had never heard of before.
You are not alone. I can tell you that even from myself. I'm largely an Oregon native, and yet I didn't know about the tunnels until just a couple decades ago when a friend of mine shared with me because we were watching a ghost hunting show. And so that was the reason that I even discovered them in the first place.
And for people that have not read the book yet, let's give them a brief synopsis without giving any spoilers away.
Sure, absolutely. So in short, it begins in 1888 when a woman awakens in an underground cell. She is drugged and disguised. She has no idea how and why she got there. She only knows that she is in the so-called Shanghai Tunnels. And as her memories start floating back to her and she starts piecing together the path that led to her abduction, she also realizes she's left behind a child in peril. So it's going to take all of her creative and adaptive skills to not only hopefully survive, but make it back to those she loves in time. So in a nutshell, that is the story. And of course, I'm sure we'll touch on the fact that what makes her a unique character as well, that we can discuss too.
Yeah, and let's talk about her character. Let's just dive right into that.
Yeah, well, like myself, as you know from starting to read the book, she is biracial. Like myself, she is the daughter of an Asian immigrant. My father's from Kyoto. Hers, on the other hand, is from China. But she is passing as white during an extremely anti-Chinese time. So it brings up a lot of questions of culture and identity and family and the true meaning of that.
And when you were writing this, and since you were biracial as well, did it give you a unique perspective?
You know, I wouldn't say maybe it gave me a new perspective as much as I was excited to be able to bring some of the things that I felt as a kid growing up and not knowing exactly where I fit in, having a foot in both worlds. And then also just bringing some elements of even my father to the table. So, you know, being that he is a Japanese immigrant that came over when he was 19 with, you know, definitely with the American dream, that was the lure for him coming over. I will say that very much what I've discovered also talking to kids of other immigrants is that there's some universality of you know, these commonalities that they have no matter what country that they're from, of being really proud that their kids are American and also being afraid to infuse too much of their past culture, the culture they were raised with, into their families and their children because they don't want their kids to be different. They really want their kids to be proud Americans. And so there is a struggle there, and very often regretting later in life that they did not encourage more of that culture and the passing down of that heritage.
I think that's really interesting. And I think as an adult, you probably have a different perspective on it than when you were a child.
Yeah, absolutely. And now as a parent myself, you know, it's so interesting because both of my kids are then a quarter Japanese. They like to claim they are quarter ninja, which I wish I had thought of that as a kid because it definitely sounds much cooler. But they are so proud to be Japanese. And I think that is so interesting. And especially in a time period that we're looking at where just a few generations ago, you know, America was in a world war against Japan. And so I think that's really beautiful it gives me a lot of hope about the future and how far we've come in a very short period of time in that way.
We have come such a long way as a nation. And in many ways, we still have a ways to go in some aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is part of the impetus for, you know, historical fiction writers to write what we do, and that we love bringing nuggets of history from the past, especially lesser known, and being able to put those into a story that for readers that maybe wouldn't necessarily read a nonfiction book, or at least not very often. And so learning from history and seeing the parallels of today are just super important.
I've gotten into historical fiction a lot lately, and I've realized that I have learned so much. And I started to question, why were we not taught this in school, even in college?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think especially in high school, obviously they're trying to cram a lot of information in a short period of time. So there's that. But I do remember for sure in high school with history classes of, learning a lot of names and dates and regurgitating it for tests and then forgetting about them completely. And it was really those rare teachers in my one English class I had and one history class I had that they were so passionate that they brought it to life and show the human aspect of it. And I think that really resonated with me, and that's something that stuck with me.
Let's talk a little bit about your journey to becoming an author. Talk to me a little bit about the background and how it came to be.
Sure. Well, I am what I call the accidental author, and that I was not, I would say smart enough to know in second and third grade that I always wanted to be a novelist and write stories like so many of my historical author friends and just author friends in general. Instead, I had so many other careers. I was a TV host for half my life. I was a PR director. I also was a wedding and event planner. I owned a wedding event planning company and did 14 weddings a summer, which I do not recommend unless you really love YMCA dances and chicken dances. Um, and then eventually what happened was I was busy with all of that. And I went to visit my grandmother, my late grandmother, Grandma Jean, my mom's mom, Iowa farm girl. She lived up on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. Went to visit her for a weekend and was putting together a cookbook full of her recipes that she had created and collected over decades. And it was going to be just a Christmas gift for the grandkids. I was going to run it off at Kinko's, very fancy self-publishing at the time, which means spiral binding and a color cover. And I thought, almost as an afterthought, to put a biographical section about her life in the beginning. So I interviewed her that weekend, and thankfully so, because I had no idea it would change the course of my life. Of course, I asked her lots of questions about her life, and she ended up sharing that she and grandfather had only dated twice during World War II. They exchanged letters the whole time. He came home on leave and proposed, and they were married for 50 years until he passed away. And then she said, "Would you like to see the letter?" So it seemed like a trick question. She'd saved all of them. We went through them that beautiful day and read through these yellow wrinkled pages that a 19-year-old sailor sent home that he didn't know if he'd be coming back at all. When I left her house, I thought it'd make a great movie since I have a, extensive TV and film background. And I decided then when I was pregnant and high on hormones and thought, I'm creating life. A book can't be that hard. And so I sat down and very blissfully ignorant, sat down and started writing letters from home, which ultimately became my debut novel.
And what a debut novel that was.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It seems like this was really the path that you were always meant to have.
The wild thing is, I was an international marketing major in college with a language concentration with Japanese, Italian, and Spanish. And it's so everything that I have done, even living in Florence for a year during college, overseas programs, I was very spoiled. I like to say that tuition was well spent on, I'm learning all about wine and pasta. And it really has been combining all those things. I'm very often asked, were you a history major? Were you a literature major? And all of the answer is no, I wish I had. But at the same time, I would say that, the film background, TV background, storytelling in that way, just a different form. And then also PR, helped me with not just promotion and stuff today, but also about writing in general. And then all of the things I learned with languages and travel and marketing, all of that ended up combining into this career. So it's funny how it ended up turning out. It's not what I planned on, but I absolutely love it.
And how long did it take you from completion of writing your first novel to when you actually got it published?
Oh, goodness. Let's see here. Well, I started writing it. This is funny. I was going to have my second child, Kieran, in 5 months. So I gave myself 4 months to write a novel. And again, it is not that hard to do, even though it's World War II, which has, yes, an enormous amount of research. It's not that hard to do when you think that every sentence you write is brilliant because you are so blissfully ignorant. So when you're not a very good critic of your own work, it's really easy to write fast. And after that, of course, I was like, oh, this needs some work. Okay. And I started learning and going to conferences and workshops and, and really understanding more about writing a novel. And so I call that my first and my 12th novel because of all the drafts that I went through, racked up a rejection from almost every agent in New York, rightfully so. But also, as my writing got better, and I think I improved the story and the writing of taking the movie in my head and putting it on paper, I think that it was interesting. The objections then I started getting were very complimentary about the writing and the characters and the story. But then I started getting more of, but World War II will never sell. If it wasn't espionage and thrillers and memoirs, then nobody was interested. And what it taught me was nothing sells until it sells. I was not obviously chasing a trend because I didn't know what the trends were. And it was just a labor of love. And so I'm so glad I didn't know better because by the time that I got all those rejections and then worked on the manuscript more, then a few books started coming out that were novels that did really well in that genre. And suddenly the publishers were more interested. So it was very nice. I ended up selling that. I think I wrote it, I want to say in 2007. I started. I sold it in 2009. And then the publisher said, yay, we're definitely, we're going to take it. We love it. And we're going to publish it in 2011. So, and I remember my family saying, wait a minute, that's 2 years from now. And I said, hey, don't rain on my parade. So I think at that time they saw the wave of World War II starting in fiction and wanted to wait till that wave caught up a little bit. And so that's what they did. And I'm glad they did.
It's so interesting to me that there are trends in publishing, and I didn't realize that until I started talking with more and more authors.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh goodness, and the whole thing that we have to remind ourselves is don't ever chase a trend, because by the time that you try to jump on the bandwagon of zombies and vampires when that was extremely hot, by the time that you pitch it to your publisher and or your agent and then you write the book and then they buy it and then it goes through edits, you're looking at sometimes very often 2 years. So by then that trend could be completely over and now they've moved on to mermaids. So I think what most important is that we just stay very aware of what's happening in the industry, that we're not oblivious to that. And yet we also, it's really important that we write something that we care about.
Let's talk a little bit about your TV and film background because people may not know that about you.
Yeah. So once again, accidental. When I was 9 years old, my mom felt I was too shy, which clearly I have recovered from that problem. Um, and so at 9, she said, I'm going to put you in this acting modeling class that was really just a 6-week course, 2 hours on Saturdays. So after those 12 hours, you were given a certificate and told you're ready for Hollywood. So there was never the plan to do anything with it. It was just a matter, she thought it would be good for me just to kind of walk on the runway and take photos and try to break out of my shell a bit. And at the end, they said, by the way, aside from the certificate, there is an audition in downtown Portland. It's ABC's affiliate news station. They're starting a kids' weekly program that is essentially like an Entertainment Tonight for kids. So educational, but also we'd interview, celebrities and bands and astronauts and all kinds of things. And my mom said, well, this will just be a good experience to find out what an audition is like. So went downtown and went to this audition and they gave us our scripts to read over a few times and then cued me and a partner to run into the studio and jump on our chairs in front of these huge, teleprompter cameras and deliver our lines. And my first line, because the show was called Popcorn, was, hi, welcome to Popcorn. My name's Kristina. So sorry that we're late. And so when they cued us, we ran and jumped on our chairs that they neglected to warn us we're on rollers.
Oh.
So I flew one way, my chair went the other way. I had no idea what else to do as my partner is sitting there horrified, of course, that I've fallen off. And I climbed back on my chair, and through my laughter, I delivered my lines. So you can imagine when we left the room, my mother scurried over and said, "How did it go?" As moms do. And I said, "I'll tell you in the car." So we were walking to the car because I'm sure this is an absolute disaster. And the producer ran out from the booth and introduced herself and said that she would be in touch. Apparently, they got a kick out of, my recovery. I guess it couldn't gone worse than that. And I still bounced back. So they saw something in that. I came back for a call back and I ended up hosting that show weekly for 5 years, from 9 until 14.
Wow. It just shows that you never know. Like you can feel like it's a disaster and then it turns into a beautiful accident.
Yeah, absolutely. And then later in life too, I ended up, owning a wedding and event planning company, and because of that, a videographer said, there is a TV station that wants us to create a wedding show that's weekly for Oregon and Washington. Since you have TV background hosting, would you like to host that too? And I said, sure. So I ended up being able to host about weddings and trends, but also they flew me all over the world. It was Turtle Island and Jamaica and Hawaii and all pre-kids. So it was very fun thing to do as, quote unquote job until kids came around and I realized what being busy really meant.
Oh, I can sympathize with that. I have one child and I'm like, oh my goodness, we have no downtime at all.
Right, right. And you're like, I thought I was busy before. And this goes for anybody that I will say, even if you don't have kids, anybody that has even just a pet, that has a dog that I consider toddlers, knows exactly what we're talking about.
Yes. How do you find time to write?
Well, now I'm an empty nester now, which is so strange. I feel like I'm way too young to say that, but they are both off at college, both my boys in Southern California. And so I do have more time now, but it probably takes even more discipline now because I don't have that structure of them going to school in the morning and my office hours being, when they are in classes before they come home. So there is kind of a nice ticking clock until they come home to be productive. And so now I definitely have to be more driven and try to stay off, Instagram reels and all the distractions.
We have so many distractions in today's world, don't we?
There are all the streaming services. I had 5 stations maybe growing up on TV. So yeah, and only cartoons on the weekends. So yeah, it's changed a bit.
Can you give us any hints about what your ninth novel is going to be about?
Oh gosh, I so wish I could. I would love to spill all of it because at the beginning, when I start a book, before inevitably at page 150 or so, when I decide that every book is the most boring book I've not just that I've written, but in the history of books. And watching paint dry is more exciting because I'm so tired of it by that point, and I'm a terrible judge because I'm way too close to it. And then I just keep going, of course, because a deadline means you don't have a choice. And thank goodness, I finish, I look back and think, okay, it's not horrible. I'm happy with that. Okay, all right, this is going to be okay. So I know that about myself. In the beginning, though, yes, this is when I describe it, I get chills. And so all to say, long story short, I would love to tell you. I will say that it takes place in the early 1900s, and it is on the West Coast again, which I love because very often, many authors, especially historicals, write somewhere other than the West Coast. And a couple of my books now have been West Coast, and this one will be California, which I'm very familiar with. I've lived there different times in my life as well. And that's all I can tell you right now, but I can't wait to share more.
Oh, and we can't wait to find out more about it when you can release it. As far as your writing process, do you outline in depth, or are you one of these that just kind of goes with it and sees where the story goes?
So we call those pantsers, right? You write by the seat of your pants. I am definitely a plotter. That's probably no brainer for anybody who, like me, has been an event planner. We like to know what's coming. For me, I definitely outline. I not extensively to the point like a Ken Follett. I believe I saw an interview with him where he said that he basically has like 80 pages or something of an outline. It's so extensive that all he really lacks is the dialogue. And in my case, I have it's more of like a skeleton. It's almost like scenes of a show or a film is how I think of it in my head. So I'll do a little mini post-it board, and every post-it will just have a few words on it that lets me know what that chapter is. And then I will research enough before I start writing, usually a couple months, 4 or 5 months maybe, to know really that I have my story and what could have happened because of history. And then I jump in and I research the entire time that I'm writing a book. I usually, if all goes well, write a book in about 9 months or so. And it's usually, I want to say about 90% close to what's going to be on the shelf, because I just edit so obsessively as I go that it is very close when I turn it into my editor. And after the 9 months, it's basically almost done. And I say it's like having a baby, 9 months, and you put your baby out there and you really hope people don't call it ugly. So that's my usual process.
Well, I know that the book, your latest book, The Girls of Good Fortune, it's getting some great reviews.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always breath holding, as we put those books out there in hope. And it's been very exciting. Yes, it's been really nice, all the achievements that it's earned so far. So just hoping that readers really enjoy it.
Oh, I think that they are. I know that I have really enjoyed it. What do you hope that readers get out of your books?
Well, with every book, I hope that not only enjoy the story and the characters and feel like they've immersed themselves in a completely different world. Aside from that, I always hope then, like myself as a reader and a writer, that they learned something, that they can look back and think, wow, I enjoyed the story, but I also learned a lot. And it makes them hopefully want to share what they learned with other people, and also to read about it more in depth themselves. So that's always the magic of book clubs. My books are read by a lot of book clubs. I'm very fortunate that way. And that way it even prompts a lot of discussion, which I think is great. So with this book in particular, aside from the Shanghai Tunnels, which is fascinating, and also being shanghaied, being abducted with drugged ale at the time, and then waking up on a ship and being sold to a short-handed captain as forced labor. That was called Shanghai. And Portland was the Shanghai capital of the world at the time. So aside from that, which I found so interesting, there's also different atrocities that happen in the story that I describe, not in detail, to the point that it is so uncomfortable to read.
Well, I think sometimes those difficult points in history do sometimes get lost because it can be uncomfortable to talk about.
Sure, absolutely. And to your point earlier with your question of why didn't we learn about this in school? I mean, I think that aside from having to cram in a lot of history in a short period of time, I think there's also the element that we all understand that it's the shameful parts of each country's history is not something that we're very proud of and love to pass along. But it is even more important, I think, that we learn about those parts so that we don't repeat them, is the hope.
And do you think that sometimes it's easier for us to digest them when it is in a historical fiction format?
Yeah, absolutely. How much more interesting and driving it home and impactful is it if we are reading it from a character's point of view and a story, just like a movie or a book, than it is to just read sort of bullet points of something that happened. And I think there's a distance then too that we have that doesn't feel like something we can relate to when it feels so much in the past and so distant and factual, versus feeling the empathy of being in someone else's shoes and making it human and realizing that these people from the past are us. They are just ordinary people in extraordinary times. And it could just be us going through the same thing they did. And I think that is the way that we remember it and in the way that it means the most to us.
And so important that we don't forget these points in history because, like we talked about before, you don't want those painful parts of history to repeat themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many things, in my story with immigrants and with certainly, we don't want Shanghai to happen anymore, but that is still trafficking. And so it's not like any of these things have gone away.
Right. Yes. And I think that, again, to your point, human trafficking, yes, that it was going on even back then.
Yes, for sure. And not just the men being forced labor on ships, with Shanghai, women were Shanghaied as well. And obviously for different purposes. So they were Shanghaied into prostitution. And that, as we know, unfortunately, is still something that is very prevalent.
And sometimes when you're delving into these tough topics, do you just have to take a little bit of a break and you're like, okay, that's enough for today?
Yeah, some of those topics are not fun for sure. And especially when I write a lot of World War II stories as well. And so when you get into those, sometimes it is really affecting and very disheartening of how humans could treat another human being as with such disdain and just as if they're not another person. And so those are tough days, and I have to take a breath and a break. And I definitely try to balance it in my stories, of not going into so much detail that it just becomes really so gruesome to read, but enough that you understand that it's not sugar coated either.
And so historical fiction is your main genre, but that's not the only thing that you've written.
Right. I have done a few other things. Yeah. So there's been, I did do, let's see here, a contemporary novella before that was part of a Christmas anthology with Ferd Michaels. And that was republished a couple times in different books. And so that was contemporary, but I ended up having some characters in there who were older, and even a couple elderly characters who were young in Letters from Home. So they served in World War II, and some of their past then came to light in much later in generations. So that was fun. I also have done a children's picture book with my sister, who is a full-time picture book illustrator. And so when she asked, do you want to pair up for a book? I said, absolutely. And it's called Ellie Mae Dreams Big. And that was very fun to work on, especially with touring with your sister, and getting our own beds. We didn't have to, go back to the old days of, shoving each other to each side of the bed.
I bet that was fun. And talk to me a little bit about your book tour, and you've currently been on tour.
Yeah, so I've been on and off touring since May, but I had a little break here and there, and it's been nice. And this will be my last tour for a while until the spring coming up, because I've got to, just buckle down and work on the next book that I'm excited about, like I said. But coming up, let's see, I'm heading to Southern California, and then North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, hopping all around there for at least a week, and then finally getting home. So I'll be gone for about 2 weeks and then get to sleep in my own bed again.
Well, that'll be so fun. So you're going to hit the Southeast a little bit.
I am. I love going down there. I was already down there a couple months ago, and I absolutely love the readers and the book clubs and all the lovely luncheons that they like to have in the South.
Oh, we do love a luncheon here in the South.
For sure. Nobody luncheons like Southerners. That's what I found. And I mean that in the best way.
Yeah, we like our books, and we also like our chicken salad and tea and all of those good things.
For sure. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I did hit a couple stops in Florida, which I always do on my tours, and I loved it. So some of my favorite stores are there. So it'll be nice to be back in the region.
Well, you'll have to make a stop in Panama City Beach when your next book comes out.
Yes, I would love that.
And when can we expect that next one?
Ooh, well, it's going to be a little bit. So I would say, unfortunately, I would have to say probably 2 years from now. So probably 2027 will be probably the year that we're looking at, which I know for normal people, that sounds really far away. For authors and in the industry, it feels like a blink.
Hey, it is going to be worth the wait.
Thank you. Well, at least if people haven't read my other books, there's some nice backlist to keep them busy in the meantime.
Yes, exactly. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people just discovering you now. And if you have not read her latest book, The Girls of Good Fortune, you've got to do it. Kristina, we have so enjoyed talking with you today.
Thank you. Me too. Thanks again for having me on the show.
And go ahead, get your sweet tea, get your chicken salad, and curl up with a good book.
Sounds great. I'm going to do that myself.
You've been listening to Chapter Chat. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Happy reading!